In my video a few days ago, we discussed the true power of the Praetorian Guards, breaking down why they were such a threat, and explaining why they were way more terrifying than some may have initially anticipated. In that video, however, we mentioned various martial arts forms that the Praetorian Guards utilized that made them the terrifying warriors that they are. And today, in anticipation of the finale of The Mandalorian Season 3, I wanted to talk specifically about the fighting styles of the Praetorians, breaking them down and analyzing exactly why they were able to contend with Force sensitives, as well as were quite possibly the greatest military force of the First Order. So again, welcome back to the archives, Acolytes of the Force, and let's talk about the various martial arts utilized by the Praetorian Guard. One of the biggest questions revolving around the Praetorians is whether or not they are the successor of the Red Imperial Royal Guard, or if they are something else entirely. There is of course the obvious name difference, but also during the era of the First Order and the establishment of the Praetorians, there is no emperor for them to protect, meaning it's very possible that these are some of the last Red Royal Guards that exist in the Star Wars galaxy following the collapse of the Empire and supposed death of the Emperor. The reason this is of note is they seem to utilize many of the same martial arts styles that the Red Imperial Royal Guard specialized in. Those fighting and combat styles are as follows: Terraskaze, Bukuni Hand, Ichani Unarmed Formed, and the final martial arts style named Narkanji, or the Blind Alley Technique. In the behind the scenes of The Last Jedi, director Rian Johnson does actually make a distinction between the Red Imperial Royal Guard and the Praetorians, stating that the Imperial Guard were always more ceremonial and formal to him, and that he wanted to develop a type of guard that was more inspired by samurai culture. He wanted to give the impression through their design that they could move and were a real threat, stating that he always believed that the Red Guard did have the capability to fight, but never really did, and therefore wanted to make the next generation of this terrifying warrior and actually see what they were capable of. The Praetorians were even inspired by real-life Praetorian guards whose members served as personal bodyguards to Roman emperors. But back to their combat styles. The most important of the fighting styles is of course Terraskaze. Terraskaze was a form of hand-to-hand combat that was created specifically to fight Force sensitives, more specifically the Jedi. In Legends, Terraskaze was developed on the backwater world of Bunduki, which had a near-human species by the name of the Epithanics. On this world, they developed this style to fight against Jedi. They did this because previously, decisions made by the Jedi Council resulted in their original homeworld being destroyed and decimated by war. Therefore, the people who founded this new planet promised that this would never happen again, and developed this method to take out Jedi if need be. It is stated, to learn Terraskaze, students were often sent to learn directly from the followers, where students were taught about its history, literature, metaphysics, and the philosophies of the Panchath Reach cultures. In order to perfect it, one had to learn directly from one of the masters of the world. In basic, Terraskaze meant steel hands. Steel hands referred to the heaviness of the practitioner's strikes, being described like heavy piston blows. It was even said that a proper strike of Terraskaze could mimic that of a slug thrower rifle, and could even punch through body armor. They also taught practitioners to be aware of their environment on an acute level and to anticipate incoming strikes, moving as quickly as possible in order to mimic the movements of a Force sensitive. This was made possible due to the central tenets of Terraskaze, that being control and mastery of oneself, as well as focused heavily on mental controls. Masters of Terraskaze were also masters at meditation, being able to slow their body to prevent toxins and poisons from entering too quickly, as well as in extreme cases, stop bleeding. Terraskaze was patterned and molded after various beasts of the galaxy, from movements to hunting characteristics. Essentially, if one were to master Terraskaze, they would come close to the gifts of a Force sensitive, despite not being able to touch it. However, some wielders of the martial arts style could actually wield the Force, such as Darth Maul, who is one of the most famous practitioners of the combat form in all of the lore, being sent directly by Darth Sidious to learn from their masters. In turn, Maul would teach this to many of his lieutenants, including that of Dryden Voss, as well as Kira, those who resided under Crimson Dawn. To make the form even more terrifying in terms of the reign of the Empire, very few individuals knew of this combat style, as it was exceptionally rare. In fact, the Praetorian Guards are the only confirmed members of the First Order to use this combat form. In terms of the other styles, let's move on to the Ichani. Ichani, in contrast to Terraskaze, was a very common style of combat, so much so that within the ranks of the Galactic Empire, it was taught to every single stormtrooper and Imperial officer, and was considered very basic. After this, you have the Bukuni hand, which basically all the information that we have is that the Praetorians used it, and there is only a single mention of this combat style in all of the lore, that coming from the Last Jedi visual dictionary, and we really don't have any idea what the combat style entails. And the final form is known as Nar Kanji, which in itself doesn't make a lot of sense, as Nar Kanji in canon is an Outer Rim world, a world home to the Jablogian species, who are not at all known for their combat prowess. However, there is clearly something more important at play here. It's obvious that the most important of all of these combat styles is Terraskaze. Sidious wanted all of the Royal Guard trained in Terraskaze, not out of fear of Jedi, but out of fear of Inquisitors, and other Force sensitives that may arise. That is why Darth Sidious wanted every single member of the Red Guard to be trained in this combat style, in fear of a revolt from the Inquisitorius, or a Dark Jedi Enclave. It's clear, however, that Darth Sidious had a profound respect for this combat form, so much so that he even had his apprentice in Maul practice it, and it's likely that Sidious went through a great deal of hoops to maintain the secrecy of Terraskaze in the era of the Empire. But that is why it is so important, and so important that in Star Wars canon, the Praetorian Guards are some of the only beings in this time period specifically that know the ancient style. A style developed specifically for non-Force sensitives to be able to counteract the gifts of the Jedi and the Force itself, making the Praetorians unique and exceptionally dangerous fighters. But anyway, my friends and acolytes, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Terraskaze as a form, and why it makes the Praetorians so deadly? As always, stay tuned tomorrow for our breakdown of the Mandalorian finale, and we hope we have a lot to discuss. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.